How to pick the strongest offer. Hey guys, it's Brad from probateresource.com. Probate Resource, we're a real estate solutions company specializing in the world of probate and inheritance properties. We buy probate and inheritance properties for cash, or if you feel like you maybe want to go the traditional route, I have a hand-picked network of real estate agents all across the country that I work with that are probate and inheritance specialists, so we can help you get your property sold. So today I want to talk about how to choose or how to pick the strongest offer, right? You're going to be getting offers on your property from lots of different people. Maybe you're just getting them from investors. Maybe you've listed the property on the open market on the MLS with an agent and you're getting offers. How do you pick the right offer? Well, and first of all, I'm here to tell you that the highest offer is not always the best offer. And I know some people just focus on the money. And the reality is sometimes people will offer ridiculous amounts of money in a form of, I call it bait and switch, right? They're just trying to lock you in at a price, and then they're going to come back and nickel and dime you to death and negotiate you down and take off for this and take off for that. And before you know it, that highest offer you got turns into not being the highest offer. So what matters in an offer in real estate? Okay. A few things. To know if someone's serious, you need to look at their due diligence period. I'm going to speak from the investor standpoint here, right? But typically a home buyer might do that too. An investor, if they're willing to offer you a very short due diligence period or maybe no due diligence period at all. In fact, sometimes I will do deals with zero due diligence in there. If I feel like it's a very strong deal and I'm very comfortable with the deal, I will do no due diligence, right? Okay. What does due diligence mean? Well, that means that's basically your inspection period. It gives you a certain period of time after you've signed the contract to do an inspection, to do whatever you need to do to assess the property. During that period, you decide that maybe this isn't the property for you or you want to renegotiate. You can go back and renegotiate, and you don't, if you back out of the deal at that point, you don't lose your earnest money deposit, which is the deposit that you put down when you sign the contract, or typically within a certain number of days of the contract. In some states, there might be what's called an option period, where you're basically putting down option money. It just depends on the state that you're in, but some places have earnest money, some places have option money and earnest money. It just really depends. But that's basically, if you back out during that time period, you don't, as the buyer, they don't lose their earnest money deposit. But what happens after the due diligence period? Typically speaking, in most real estate contracts, once the due diligence period is up, that earnest money goes hard. What does that mean? That means if for some reason the buyer backs out of the contract at that point in time, the seller gets to keep the earnest money. Now, it depends on the way the contract is worded. Sometimes you might have to go to court and fight for that. Sometimes you might have to request that from a broker. Look at your contract, look at the wording. Because once that due diligence period is up, many times, in many cases, the seller is actually entitled to get that earnest money deposit and the buyer forfeits that earnest money deposit. Now, again, pay attention to the contract, pay attention to the special steps, read the language in the contract. Sometimes some investors and some buyers will have, I call them weasel clauses in there, where they find ways to basically back out of the deal at any time for any reason whatsoever and get all their earnest money back, regardless of the due diligence period. So pay attention to that. Read the contract. If you're not sure, consult with an attorney or consult with someone you know who might be able to give you accurate legal advice, obviously like an attorney. Pay attention to that. Also, if your buyer is like an owner-occupant that's going to buy the property to live in the property and they're getting a mortgage, sometimes in addition to the due diligence period, there is a financing contingency in there, which means that even after the due diligence period is up, if for some reason their financing falls through, they can still back out of the contract and get their earnest money back without penalty. And why did I use quotes there? Well, they could say, which I've had this happen in deals before. In fact, just a few months ago, I had this happen where this person supposedly had been through underwriting. Everything was good. We were 2 days away from closing, and their agent reaches out to me and says, the lender has declined the borrower for the loan because something happened, right? So now all of a sudden the deal's dead. Luckily, I had a bunch of backup offers on this property. It was a very nice property, good area, very competitive price point. I had backup offers. I didn't even have to put it back on the MLS. I already had signed backup offers. Called the backup person. I said, hey, does your buyer want this? They said, the first one said, no, actually, they found another house. So thanks for calling us. And then I called the second one. They said, yes, absolutely. We love that house. Please, please, please. We'll send whatever updates we need right now. And we got back on it and we had it closed within just a few weeks. So it all worked out great. So pay attention to due diligence period and financing contingencies in the contract. The other thing you need to pay attention to is the earnest money. Someone who's putting up a very small amount of earnest money might not be as serious as someone who's putting up a larger amount of earnest money. So pay attention to that. I've even seen some investors put no earnest money in the contract whatsoever. Like literally there's no clause in there, which in some areas, in some states, that's perfectly legal. For instance, I live in the state of Georgia. Earnest money is not a legal requirement for a contract in the state of Georgia. You don't have to have earnest money. Now it's customary and it's traditional for people to put down earnest money, because sometimes I'll argue with real estate agents. They'll say, which I always do earnest money, but they'll say, you have to have earnest money like it's a legal requirement. It's like, no, it's not. If you actually read the laws, there's no legal requirement for earnest money in the state of Georgia to have a valid real estate contract. It's not required. Now, in some states, it is required. And also, like I mentioned, in some areas, you might have what's called option money or an option period, in which case there's an amount of option money. It's spelled out in the contract. So that's going to tell you how serious they are and also how quickly they're going to close. I want to bring something up here, which I talk about in some other videos, and that is talking about wholesalers, right? There's nothing wrong with wholesaling. I wholesale properties. Now, the difference is whenever I wholesale a property, I actually buy it and close on it first, and then I'll sell it to another investor after the fact. But I will always close as agreed. When I tell someone that I'm going to buy their house for a specific price, we're out of due diligence and all that, I'm going to close on the property as agreed, as I said I was going to do. Now, there are some people, some investors who their entire business model is wholesaling, which means they basically just sell this contract or this property to another investor and they never actually own the property. And they may collect an assignment fee, or they may do a double closing on it, or something along those lines, where they basically just buy and sell it right away. And they make a small amount, and sometimes a very large amount, but usually it's a small amount, maybe $10,000, $5,000, just a small amount of money. And their entire business is just volume. They just do lots and lots and lots of transactions, kind of like a real estate agent per se, but not quite like a real estate agent. And a lot of these wholesalers will present you a contract with a very long due diligence period. Why is there a very long due diligence period in that contract? Well, that's because they want an amount of runway to be able to sell this deal to other investors. And if for some reason in that long runway, maybe it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, they can't find a buyer within that time period, then they will back out of the contract. Or what they'll do, and there's actually a lot of investors who operate on this business model, a lot of very well-known big-time investors that you might find on Google that run very successful businesses, do millions of dollars a year, and this is their business strategy. They will put you under contract, and they'll negotiate a price with you, and then they will pitch the deal out to their network of investors to buy the deal, and then they will get offers back from their network of investors. And then what will happen is in many cases, their network investors will say, no, that's too much money. I'll pay you X for it. So let's say, for instance, they put you under contract for $240,000 on your house. Okay. They're going to go pitch it out to their investor network for, let's say, $260,000. They're going to get feedback from their network, and no one is going to say, no, we're not paying $260,000. I'll give you $230,000, right? So then they're going to come back to you and say, okay, Mr. Seller, we're going to have to renegotiate you. I will give you $210,000 for your property instead of $240,000. So they came down $30,000. Well, they already have a buyer that said that they would pay $230,000 for the property. So now they're going to make $20,000 difference in the area. So they just negotiated you back down, and they're basically negotiating their margin into that deal. And then they might close with a new person. Now, what I found with these particular investors, and I know a lot of them, I've been in this business for a number of years. I've run in the same groups as these people. I know a lot of these people, and this is how they choose to run their business, and it works for them, and that's great. A lot of them, because they're doing such high volume, they're also in that process dealing with a lot of maybe newer investors who are, bidding it up and offering a really high price and then getting cold feet at the last minute. So they may come back to you and say, yeah, we'll do 210. And then you agree to drop down to 210. And then their 230 buyer all of a sudden at the last minute backs out on a contract and says, no, sorry, it's not going to work. And they don't close, or they don't show up to closing. Is this other investor that you under a contract at 210 for going to close on the transaction? Sometimes they might, but most of the time they're not. So then they're just going to terminate the deal. They might forfeit their earnest money. So you might get the earnest money back, but usually speaking, these investors are not putting up a very significant amount of earnest money. You might get, $500 back or something like that. But what does that mean to you as a seller? That means you're back to the drawing board. You have to find another buyer again. You got to start through the process all over again. You got to renegotiate with all these people. You got to go under contract. And then it makes you question, well, who's legit and who's not, right? So those are some of the things that can happen when you're dealing with investors on those types of things. Also, if you're working through a real estate agent, you're going to get offers that run the gamut. Maybe you're going to get offers from investors through your real estate agent. Maybe you're going to get offers from potential buyers. If you have potential buyers, you need to, same with investors, how much earnest money are they putting up? What kind of contingencies do they have in their contract? Contingencies are sort of ways out, right? So make sure you're checking at contingencies, earnest money, due diligence period, closing time. And then if they're getting financing, you need to make sure that your agent has reached out to their lender, or maybe some agents require the buyer to get pre-approved with their own preferred lender to know whether they're serious, because mortgage lenders are a dime a dozen out there, especially in the last few years when the real estate market was super, super hot. Everybody and their brother was a mortgage banker or mortgage broker, right? It was the thing to do because money was flying around everywhere. Now, as the market starts to tighten up, only the good guys survive and the bad ones end up going and getting a job somewhere else doing something else. But what happens is anybody and everybody will say that they can close on the deal, and the difference is an experienced mortgage broker, mortgage lender is going to be able to get that deal to the finish line and overcome the hurdles, or be able to tell up front that the buyer is not qualified to actually get the loan. So when you're dealing with a buyer who's getting a loan, don't hold your breath until the very end, because until you get that clear to close, things could fall apart last minute. And like I mentioned, you should be paying attention to a financing contingency in the contract and understanding what that financing contingency looks like. And your real estate agent should be able to explain to you what that means and what all that looks like. Because with that financing contingency, they could still back out of the contract even after the due diligence period is over. So I hope this helps you out a little bit. Picking the strongest offer. Like I said, the highest offer is not always the best offer. So you need to look at the other components of an offer and understand if that's the right offer for you. So like I mentioned before, at Probate Resource, we're a real estate solutions company specializing in probate and inheritance properties. We buy properties for cash all over the country. And we also have a hand-picked network of real estate agents that we work with all throughout the country that are probate and inheritance specialists that can help you get your deal to the finish line. So we offer those two options. You want a quick cash, fast cash offer, basically the easy button, get an easy offer on your house, or you want to go the traditional route, maybe maximize every last dollar. We have those two options for you. So if you're interested in working with us, you go to probateresource.com. There's also a link below in the description, and fill out the form there on our website, and you'll speak to a member of our team, and we'll chat with you and figure out what we think might be the best fit for you. So thanks again for checking out this video. I'm Brad from probateresource.com. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.